Right now, you think you're choosing to watch this video. You think that was your decision, that you waited up, made a call, and acted on it. But in 1983, a neuroscientist ran an experiment that suggested something deeply unsettling, that by the time you feel like you're making a decision, your brain already made it for you, hundreds of milliseconds ago, without telling you. And the feeling of choosing? That might just be a story your brain tells you after the fact. Here's what happened. Benjamin Libet sat volunteers in a chair in front of a clock. Simple setup. He asked them to do one thing: flick their wrist whenever they felt like it. No schedule, no prompt. Completely spontaneous. Entirely their choice. But while they sat there, Libet had electrodes attached to their scalps, measuring electrical activity in their brains in real time. And here's what he found. Before a volunteer consciously felt the urge to move their wrist, before they were even aware a decision was forming, their brain was already preparing to move. A wave of electrical activity, called the readiness potential, began building in the brain roughly 550 milliseconds before the movement happened. That doesn't sound like much, half a second. But the volunteers didn't feel the urge to move until 200 milliseconds before the movement, which means their brain had already started the process 350 milliseconds before they felt anything at all. The decision wasn't made when they thought it was. It was already done. They were just the last to know. Libet published his findings, and the scientific world went quiet for a moment. Then it erupted. Because what he was suggesting, without quite saying it, was that conscious free will might be an illusion. That what we experience as choosing is really just our brain informing us of a decision it already made, like a boss sending a memo to tell you what was decided in a meeting you weren't invited to. But it got worse, much worse. In 2008, a team of researchers at the Max Planck Institute in Germany decided to push the experiment further. They put volunteers in a brain scanner, an fMRI machine, and asked them to choose, freely and spontaneously, whether to press a button with their left hand or their right hand, then report when they felt they'd decided. The results were staggering. The researchers could predict which hand the volunteer was going to choose with significant accuracy, up to 7 seconds before the volunteer felt they had made the decision. 7 seconds. The choice felt free and spontaneous, but buried in the patterns of brain activity, the answer was already there, written in neural firing, invisible to the person whose hand it was. So what does this mean? Does free will not exist at all? Not quite, and this is where it gets complicated. Libet himself, the man who ran the original experiment, didn't actually conclude that free will was dead. He pointed out something important. Even though the brain initiated the movement unconsciously, volunteers could still consciously veto it at the last moment. They could feel the urge rising and choose not to act on it. He called it free won't rather than free will. Your brain may start the process without you, but you can still hit the brakes. And then came the critics, neuroscientists and philosophers who argued the whole interpretation was flawed from the start. The experiment, they pointed out, only tested one very specific kind of decision, when to flick a wrist. That's not really a choice in any meaningful sense. It's not the same as deciding who to marry, what career to pursue, or whether to tell the truth in a difficult moment. Those decisions involve deliberation, values, history, context, nothing like a spontaneous wrist flick in a lab. Others challenged the readiness potential itself. More recent research has suggested it might not represent a decision being made at all. It might just be background neural noise, random fluctuations in brain activity that sometimes tip over into an action, rather than a deliberate, unconscious plan being executed. A 2021 analysis found the evidence linking the readiness potential to conscious decision-making was weaker than decades of headlines had suggested. The effect was real, but far less conclusive than Libet's original interpretation implied. So here's where science actually stands. Your brain does things before you're aware of them. That much is clear. Most of what your brain does, regulating your heartbeat, processing visual information, filtering background noise, happens entirely without your conscious input. Consciousness, it turns out, is not running the whole show. It never was. But whether that means free will doesn't exist depends entirely on what you mean by free will. If free will means a ghost in the machine, a soul pulling levers entirely independent of your brain, your history, your biology, then yes, that probably doesn't exist. The science is pretty clear on that. But if free will means the capacity to deliberate, to reflect, to override impulses, to act in line with your values, even when it's hard, that's a different question entirely, and the Libet experiment doesn't touch it. What the science has actually shown us is something stranger and more interesting than a simple yes or no.
Your conscious mind is not the origin of your decisions. It's more like the narrator, telling the story of choices that are already emerging from somewhere deeper, faster, and older than conscious thought. The unsettling part isn't that free will doesn't exist. The unsettling part is that the question is far harder than anyone expected. And the fact that you're thinking about it right now, really thinking, weighing it, pushing back on it, that itself feels like something. Whether it counts as free will is up to you. Or is it?